My name is Rohit. I am involved with a couple of networks. One is ASHA, Alliance for Sustainable and Holistic Agriculture, ASHA Kisan Swaraj. That ASHA is more into policy advocacy on a whole lot of agriculture themes, agriculture and food themes, on ecological agriculture, farm income security, consumer access to safe, diverse, nutritious, sufficient food, and also on farm access and ownership of agriculture resources. That's on ASHA. I'm a steering group member there. Also, there is another network called National Coalition for Natural Farming. I'm the national facilitator for states there. And the idea of National Coalition for Natural Farming is for transition on agroecological transition from the current farming paradigm to a natural organic chemical free agriculture paradigm. So that's where I am, and I guess that's me. And some of the other topics in addition to is organic expensive and why the case, what can be done. There were some other topical topics that were taken on pesticide management bill. So this was something that was going on at that point of pesticide management bill. Pesticide management bill.
Pesticide.
Okay. Yeah. So that was one topic that was going on. There was a free trade agreement, RCEP, which was going on. And so the idea was so that people in Mumbai also start understanding on some of these topics and what are the actions that can be taken on those as well. So on a whole, seeing again where there is energy, where there is interest, and what can be done about some of these as well. And as Gaurang was mentioning, so then the idea is now to try and see if we can continue back the energy momentum that was created and bring it up from there. And then for today, then the topic that we were thinking on, where do we start from? So we thought can organic natural farming feed the country? Well, that is quite a topical thing, especially with the Sri Lanka situation and experiment. Was something that we thought we'll start from there. And there is a whole narrative that is being created that organic natural farming cannot feed the country, that the disaster that has happened in Sri Lanka, organic farming has been a major reason for that. Whereas the truth is somewhere entirely on a different scale. So we thought we'll start from there and see if and build on beyond that. So there were a few things that we thought would be interesting in sharing over here, and then we can not to keep too long of a monologue beyond what might be useful. So one part is what actually happened in Sri Lanka, and the other part in what data do we actually have in India in the organic natural farming transition itself, and what are some of the lessons coming from it, whether yields are actually going down or whether they're going up, whether they're staying similar. So from a Sri Lanka perspective, the backdrop is that in the Sri Lanka government was actually importing agrochemicals to the tune of $300 to $400 million annually, on a yearly basis. They were a highly import dependent country at that point of time. India also imports a whole lot of agrochemicals, but that's a different story that point of time. But because of a whole lot of other economic mismanagement issues, a whole lot of the neoliberal policies that the Sri Lankan government was facing, they were starting to face a huge lot of crunch, huge lot of foreign reserve shortage, and at that point of time was when the Sri Lankan president thought, okay, fine, this is a way for the Sri Lankan government to actually save on precious foreign reserves, and then we'll just put a ban, we'll just put a stop to the fertilizer altogether. Now again, if you look at the entire process during 2021 when this was started, the Sri Lankan civil society itself was not happy. Sri Lanka also has a movement which is working on organic natural farming, and they have been building towards Sri Lanka also needs to go transition away from agrochemicals. But the transition is something that it must be gradual. I mean, you look at any sort of transition. You look at moving people away from. I mean, if you want to do detoxification drive or something, generally it is said to do it gradually. I mean, you do not just stop it all of a sudden. I mean, if you are addicted to junk food and so on, also if you're stopping junk food, you also look at what actually you are going to be replacing that with. You do not do it in a manner where you stop eating junk food and you stop eating food entirely at all. That is pretty much in a way what Sri Lanka had done. Stop importing fertilizers, but not in a manner on what that replacement could be, what that alternative scenario could be. And we've got a whole lot of regular reports coming from the Sri Lankan civil society, where they've been mentioning they've not been involved in the transition. They had a whole lot of experience on how that transition could be done, a whole lot of ideas, where none of that was taken into account into part of, and at multiple times throughout the year 2020, 2021, where they kept mentioning there is this happening, this is a disaster that is going to lead to a whole lot of problems, and it did at the end of the day. What we saw happened, where a whole production of a whole lot of things actually went haywire. But that is often tarred as for the criticism of organic farming led to that. But there was no actually organic farming actually being done. It was actually stopping of fertilizer input, and that was pretty much about it. There were some imports which were attempted for organic fertilizer rather than self-production, rather than what that graded transition could look like. And that is what actually has led us to where we are at. And not only in Sri Lanka, but pretty much around the world now, I mean in India as well, that has led to a whole lot of criticism generally of organic farming or natural farming. Whilst there has been in India, over the last few years, there has been a solid political will which has been built on actually looking at transitioning away, moving away from agrochemicals in the country as well. And I'm just going to share a few slides which will just share about what some of our experiences have been. So I'll just start from what Andhra Pradesh's experience has been. Now, Andhra Pradesh has been one of the pioneers in a large state level transition away from agrochemicals through something called Andhra Pradesh community managed natural farming, where the entire state is moving towards that. What I'm sharing is one of the independent assessment studies on yield change in various crops from chemical farming to natural farming. And if you look at just the yield part of that, the first part until here, changing yields, you will see, for pretty much for most of the crops, there has been an increase in yield. And that is actually, that transition coming from 1 to 2 years of transition period time, where the yield is actually higher than what you are getting for conventional, where the yield is actually higher in natural farming compared to what you are getting in conventional farming. And you look at crops after crops. Paddy, groundnut, cotton. Other than black gram here, you look at red gram, which is similar, ragi, groundnut, maize. In crops after crops, the yield has been higher in natural farming, which again is quite different. And in Andhra Pradesh, there has been a proper systematic program which has been put into place. Farmers have been asked to try it on a small part of their land, and then actually once they are convinced, there are no incentives, no financial incentives which are provided to farmer. And one of the main reasons of transition has been the yield is actually staying similar or even going higher as well, compared to what generally the mainstream narrative has been. There has also been something called PMDS, pre-monsoon dry sowing, which has been done in Andhra Pradesh community managed natural farming as well. So I mean the area that you see, so if you look at the farm and then you look at the nearby surrounding, so this is Anantapur. Anantapur is, I mean, as some of us would already know, it is one of the most drought prone areas in the country. With huge water issues, with huge areas where growing crops is difficult. So there is something called the pre-monsoon dry sowing, which has been tried out and being used in the Andhra Pradesh community managed natural farming. So one of the advantages of actually natural farming, organic farming, has been that the water usage is quite minimal compared to conventional agriculture. You do not do it in a manner with the increased soil organic carbon, with the increased water retention capacity, and ideally trying to do farming based on moisture and the soil humidity. You do not actually need to use that much water. So there has been this technique called pre-monsoon dry sowing, where before in the summer itself, with the very little amount of water, you actually do cultivation based on mulching and so on. Whole lot of techniques which actually allow for crops to be cultivated even in peak summer in areas, in drought prone areas as well, which has worked very well in Andhra Pradesh. What this also means is that the cropping intensity that we have in the country generally, which ranges between 1 to 2, and what that means is that we often get in a lot of places one crop during the year, whether kharif or rabi, whether the summer or the winter crop, or sometimes in some cases it might be 2 crops, but the range is generally that. But now here we are seeing the potential. So it would be 1.3, 1.4, the average 1.1, whatever might be the cropping intensity. But here what we are seeing is in Andhra Pradesh there is there is cropping throughout the year. So you are actually on the same plot of land, you are actually being able to generate more output. So on the one hand, if you're just comparing just on a like for like the yield that we are seeing, in natural organic farming, in a certain period we are seeing that stays similar or even goes higher. And at the same time, you are actually also being able to do more crops throughout the year as well. In terms of just the output, whether organic natural farming can feed the country, this is one solid example. Another thing, so this is just from Andhra Pradesh. Another thing I wanted to share was on there is this All India Network Program on Organic Farming. This is again a union government thing which has been going on for over 15 years. And here they have done a comparison of organic natural farming with conventional farming, and seeing what is actually the impact on that. And they've done